And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are here to break down the divisional round of the 2025 NFL playoffs. We are super excited to get into these final 8 teams and all 4 matchups. 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. And I mean, are these the best 8 teams left in the NFL? They clearly proved so. Um, Before we move on, though, Laura, we didn't quite film on Tuesday. So if you watched our predictions episode, there was only one game we disagreed on, Laura. And you want to go and pull those picks up for me? You can take it away, Laura.
Yeah, the one game we disagreed on was Washington and Tampa Bay, and Washington doinks their way into the second round, giving you a 1 point lead. But that is not discouraging me in my picks for this week. I have come back from worse before. And then the Super Bowl, the big thing hanging over our heads is worth 2 points. And so I still have, maintain a margin here. But with you being up 1 point will allow you to pick who you would favor in the Super Bowl. So that's huge for you. But I'm content. A little disappointed in how things went for the Chargers, of course. And then, of course, Washington just doinks it in somehow. But nonetheless, still got 3 more rounds to go. I'm excited. You guys are all excited. Let's go ahead and get into the divisional breakdown. Lewis, starting off, of course, with those Houston Texans beat the Los Angeles Chargers last week in a very good fashion. Now going on the road to Kansas City, the Chiefs, who are coming off a bye, are favored by a whole 8 points at home. Which way are you leaning, Lewis?
I mean, it's that time of the year where the Chiefs have their first round bye, and then they get to play the scrappy, just had a tough, playoff win team. You always usually the 4 seed. Then they go right into Kansas City and they get smacked up by the Chiefs. I'm not gonna hide the way I'm leaning in this game. I'm leaning Chiefs, Laura. And we did see this matchup only 4 weeks ago on the week before Christmas on a Saturday, in which I mean it was pretty much Kansas City from the jump. It was just the difference in talent across the board really stood out in that one. And the biggest thing in this game, and what was the biggest thing when we previewed that game as well, is the presence of Chris Jones, especially in big games. Because we remember last year, he was almost like the MVP of that whole playoff run. The havoc he wrecked in that Ravens game, what he was able to do against Josh Allen in the divisional round. And then he had a great Super Bowl as well. These are the big games that he gets up for. And against this shaky, to say the least, Texans offensive line, especially the interior of that line, he is going to run amok. And this Chiefs defense, they've been great at stopping the run all season long. And what does Bobby Slowick love doing on first and second down? Running the ball. So it's going to put CJ Stroud in a lot of uncomfortable third and long situations. And if you remember, Larob, in that first game the Texans and the Chiefs played, the only reason why it was somewhat close at half was because Tank Dell was having a really impressive game. But then obviously he gets hurt in that game, and now not to even have him, who you found a matchup against the Chiefs that you liked with Tank Dell, now that option is gone as well. So you're gonna have McDuffie lined up against Nico Collins majority of the game. And although I probably like Nico in that matchup, consistently that can't be your best option on offense, especially with this Chiefs run defense just stopping your rushing attack a time and time again over. Um, there's just more ways, and this is going to be a theme of how I want to approach these matchups, Rob, is when you look at the losing or the team that's projected to lose, what needs to go right for them to win this game? And when I'm looking at their offensive side of the ball, they need to hit on explosives. And when you can't run the ball, you can't set up the explosive plays, it's going to be a long day for this Texans offense.
Yeah, and you talk about, pulling Chris Jones out of the garage, get him nice and warmed up for this, three-peat playoff run. I want to talk about Travis Kelce, who a little bit of a slower season for him this year, down and all across the board. But we know, think back to him last year in the divisional round where this Chiefs team was playing the Bills. He had two huge touchdowns in that game. You're pulling out that nice soft top convertible in the summertime to go and take it out to Cars and Coffee. And that's what the Chiefs do in the playoffs. And then for the Texans, it's about, keeping the ball safe. Like you mentioned, no Tank Dell. It's going to be a lot of Nico Collins, John Mechie, and Xavier Hutchinson. And we saw the Texans on their first drive, John Mechie fumble, that if they lost that game, I mean, a lot would have had to go on the other way for them to lose that game. But it's those mistakes, right? That Mechie fumble, CJ Stroud, pretty bad interception in that game as well. It's those turnovers is what's going to lose you a game like this against a team like this in the Chiefs, and that's why I agree with you. I feel like we're both going to pick the Chiefs. I do think this Texans defense played outstanding last week, and they did play outstanding last time as well against Mahomes, picking him off in that game. I think those two edge rushers are going to have another fantastic performance. Keep it close. I think the Texans do cover, but the Chiefs are going to chief, and they're going to win this game 23-17.
Yeah, the Chiefs just historically, with Patrick Mahomes, are not a good team covering massive spreads, and obviously the spread in this one 8.5. I mean, I don't think they're going to cover either. I do have it at a 7 point game, but it's not going to feel close. I think the Chiefs are going to have a consistent lead and just play keep away basically the entire game from the Texans. And unless the Texans hit on an explosive to Nico Collins or like some of the other guys you were mentioning, that could be a big thing. X factor for this game, Laraib. A former Houston Texan receiver, Mr. DeAndre Hopkins. Everyone's giving guys like Mike Evans and these older receivers a ton of Devontae Adams when DeAndre Hopkins, for the majority of his career, was the best. But he could never have what those guys had, which was long playoff runs where they had big playoff moments. And he may be over the hill now, but I still think that with this team, he can have huge clutch moments and he'll be remembered for being a clutch playoff performer. And it all starts against his former team. Give me some big nuke catches in this ball game. I have the Chiefs winning 24-20.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the last game on Saturday. We have the Commanders, who also pulled off an upset against the Bucks last week, traveling to Detroit to
Upset
play the
to some.
Lions. Oh, who get to play the Lions, who are favored by a whole 9.5 points now on ESPN Bet, which originally opened up at 5.5. The over under for this game is 55.5 points. I think everyone is expecting fireworks, but I'm leaning the other way. I think this is going to be a low, or I'm going towards the under in this game, not low scoring. I feel like it's going to be an under type of game where we talk about this line team coming off of rest. And now they're at home. David Montgomery questionable to play in this game against a Commanders team who did what they needed to do last week. But to me, the eye test, they were not that impressive offensively to me in that game. And this is a coach, two teams coached by the crazy Dans, right? The Dan Gamble and the Dan Quinn, two guys who have gone for it on historic paces this year on fourth down. And for the Commanders, we saw that bite them really bad 2 times where, they really should have settled for points, but still found a way to win that game. Now you're facing the crazier Dan in Detroit. I just feel like this Commanders team is really going to start to struggle. I think Jayden Daniels is going to start to show some of those rookie mistakes that we've seen. I did predict that same thing last week, but I just think once again that Commanders rush defense is really porous. And when you're facing a team like the Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs, I think this is going to be a different type of ball game.
I agree with you, Laraib. I do think the under will hit if you look at my projected score. But, I was all in the Commanders last week because Baker and the Bucks defense just never inspired confidence in me. And yeah, I just thought if this was a close game entering the fourth, Jayden Daniels just has that voodoo. He knows how to get it done, and he will get it done. This is a whole different beast in this Lions team. Finally getting some week off or week of rest, but knowing Dan Campbell, they probably did a full, 11v11 scrimmage, ones versus ones, just to make sure they're in game shape because he's a psychopath. This Lions offense has no flaws, especially in matching up against Commanders defense. They're going to be able to run the ball at will in this matchup. And if the Commanders aren't able to stop the run, this game is going to get ugly fast. And how are the Commanders going to keep up? They need to keep up offensively. And although I really do like Jayden Daniels, I just think this offense can stall out way too many times. And even though the Commanders had this historic fourth down conversion, success rate season, when it comes down to the playoffs and these nitty gritty moments, I trust just the better overall talent, and that's the Lions. And I think their ability with their offensive pieces is so much more consistent than the Commanders with their pieces to convert these consistent fourth downs. And let's be honest, the Commanders have not been able to run the ball successfully for a while. And even with some of these Lions injuries, they've still been a really good run defense all year long. So it's going to be a ton on Jayden Daniels' shoulders going on the road to Detroit after an emotional win last week on a Sunday night. This is a really kind of a tough spot that the Commanders were put in for this game. And I think the Lions not only win, but they win huge in this game. The biggest X factor for me is going to be this Lions offensive line. I don't think Jared Goff gets touched in this game. Laraib, I have the Lions winning 38-10 in this matchup.
I think you and I both agree here. We're gonna have massive blowouts on our hands. I'm gonna go ahead and pick the Lions 30-17. They win in commanding fashion. I don't know, you seem to disagree. That's
I mean,
commanding.
you said blowout and then gave me a 13-point game. I guess they cover, but give me some excitement. It's playoff time. But regardless, we both agree. Commanders, awesome season. And hey, if you pull off an upset, this will be. I mean, if I see the Chiefs losing the playoffs, I'll be shocked. But this would definitely be one of the biggest upsets I've ever seen in my life. But as of now, if you ask most Commanders fans, hey, would you be happy with a win in the playoffs and then a loss at Detroit? They'd probably be like, yeah, yeah. But regardless, I think this is going to be an entertaining game. I think there's going to be a lot of head scratching decisions by both coaches, and I think it'll be a fun way to end Saturday night. But now on to Sunday. Two very exciting games, which we might have some disagreements on here, Laraib. Starting with the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Philadelphia to face the Eagles. Eagles are 6.5-point favorites at home. 43.5 is the over-under. And I want to throw this question at you, Laraib. When you think of NFL football, and I say, what are the two most important things that personnel wise for a team that determine outcomes in most scenarios? What are the two most important personnel things you need to have that will give you the biggest advantage in a game? I think the answer would be head coach and quarterback. And the difference in this game, considering the spread, is wild to me because I think we can both agree Sean McVay is a much better head coach than Nick Sirianni.
Mm,
I
yeah,
think we can agree
I'll
with
give you
that.
that one.
And I think we can both agree that Matt Stafford is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts.
Mm,
Not fantasy, just a quarterback. We can distinguish the two. Correct?
you could argue that to me, yes.
Would you argue that to me?
Mm, and on a different day,
You are
maybe
lying to
on a different
yourself.
day, I
You are
would.
lying to
On a different day,
yourself.
I would.
All that being said, there is a reason this is a 6.5-point line, Laura.
Okay.
There is a reason this is. I mean, well, hey, I am not giving out my score right now. The floor will be yours pretty soon. It's because the difference in the trenches, Larob. I mean, you look at this Eagles offensive and defensive line and just compare it to what the Vikings were last week. And the Vikings have a solid defensive front. Offensive line definitely shakier whenever Christian Darrisaw got hurt for the year. But this is a whole different ballpark that the Rams are going to be facing this week. Coming off a shorter week, 6 days versus the break that the Eagles had, 7. So give the Rams a little bit of leeway there. I mean, Eagles a little bit of leeway there. Um, so ultimately, the belief going into this game, if you're on the Eagles side, is you're saying we can out talent this Rams team at home. And that's if you have the belief in their talent as a whole. I turn the floor over to you, Laraib. Why should the Eagles be favored in this matchup?
Because of everything. Okay, quarterback, head coach.
That's pretty
That's it.
important. That's
Okay,
pretty important.
every single thing else is in favor of the Eagles. We saw what they did to that Packers team last week, completely dismantled them, made them look like little boys on that field. And now this Rams team, you know, LA strong, LAPD, LAFD, shout out all them. Got to play the sorry ass Vikings team who completely crumbled. Sam Darnold cost himself, I don't know, somewhere near $250 million in that game against the Rams. And now you're telling me that this Eagles team is going to be at home. The Rams are traveling across the country to play them in a game that we already saw from this year, Lewis, where Matthew Stafford put 250 yards up. Puka Nacua put up 100 yards. Kyron Williams averaged 4.5 rushing yards per carry, and they still got dominated in a game. Jalen Hurts only threw for 100 and I think 70 yards in that game. This Eagles defense is the great equalizer, and Saquon Barkley is going to dismantle this Rams defense. Unlike what happened to them last week, Aaron Jones, you have Justin Jefferson, you have Jordan Addison, but Sam Darnold at the helm versus having Jalen Hurts, that's just two different things, two different auras.
Is it?
Is that what you think?
Here's what I think. I think Jalen Hurts is not a good quarterback. He's a fine quarterback. He's whatever. He's not on the same level as Matt Stafford. And if you were to rank the 8 quarterbacks left in the playoffs, I'd have him soundly at 8. That's what I think about Jalen Hurts. I'll let you think on that for a while until you agree
So
with me.
you would have C.J. Stroud over Jalen
Yes,
Hurts.
I would. I would have CJ Stroud over Jalen Hurts. And I 1,000,000%, at least
You
this
would have
version of
Jared
Jalen
Goff
Hurts,
over Jalen Hurts.
this version of Jalen Hurts, who I've watched play football the last few weeks, besides that one Pittsburgh game where he sat there, this is what y'all wanted, right? No, you know what I wanted? I wanted when you had 4 turnovers on the Packers last week to maybe get more than 7 points off those turnovers. The only reason why that game wasn't a complete blowout is because you couldn't throw the ball past 10 yards down the field, and your lead receiver was reading a book on the sideline because he was so bored out there, not getting any action all night long. I do not believe in Jalen Hurts. And Nick Sirianni, although he is a winner, he is accomplished, it's hard for me to believe in him. All this being said, I am picking the Eagles to beat the Rams. And I don't like it. I really don't. And if the Rams win, I'm going to be kicking myself. But ultimately, it comes down to talent. And this Rams defensive line is just way too small. You mentioned it. This Eagles offensive line is massive. They said, hey, Saquon, we want our damn rest week 18. So when we get to the playoffs, we're going to be giving you the biggest holes ever. And, who cares about that rushing record? We are going to get you a Super Bowl. And, last week they ran the ball all over the Packers. And this week, going up against a younger, smaller defensive front in the Rams, I just think it's going to be way too much of a task for this Rams defense to keep up with this Eagles rushing attack. And if the Eagles can just play turnover-free football, their defense will get the job done. I mean, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua are fine targets, very good even. But in this matchup, you're going to need a lot more than that to, really consistently move the ball against this Eagles front. They're going to completely stuff the run game. And you mentioned it, over 4.5 yards per carry for Kyron Williams in that game. A lot of that was kind of stuff in the second half where he was getting a lot of big runs on 3rd and longs. But I'm leaning with talent this one. I don't feel good about it, but I am going with the Eagles in a close game. Eagles 26 to Rams 20.
Yeah, that's a same exact score prediction I have written down. I do believe this is going to be a one-score game, but it is not going to feel close at any point. The last time these two teams played, Saquon Barkley had two huge long touchdown runs of 65-yard plus. I think he dominates in this one again, and people start questioning Jalen Hurts. Oh, can he throw the ball? This and that. We will see him in that NFC Championship game
He'll be
into,
doing a lot of
and
this,
he will be ready
a
for
lot of
that
this, and a
task.
lot of
But
this.
first they got to get first they got to get through this Rams team
Huh,
at home, and they win this game 26-20.
huh. That's what you're going to be seeing a lot of, but I agree. 26-20. Wow. Two great minds. Now, finally, the main event, Laraib, the game that we have been excited for like almost a month now, when we basically saw these two teams aligning for this 2-3 matchup. The two big MVP candidates, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, facing off in Buffalo. Baltimore is the 1 point favorite here, Laura. There's so much to get into in this game and so many different ways to look at it. But I want you to specifically tell me, which quarterback do you prefer in this matchup?
Which quarterback do I prefer? How about the one with two, not one, two MVPs? The one who's been on a tear this season with 40 passing touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, many of those which were not his fault. That's who I like in this game. Going on the road in Buffalo, it's going to be cold, potentially snowy, but I love Lamar
Wait, you
Jackson.
think Lamar is going to outplay Josh Allen?
Oh, I 100% believe he's going to do that.
Okay.
Do you feel a certain
No,
way?
I think Josh Allen is going to outplay Lamar. I think he has to. If Josh Allen doesn't outplay Lamar, this game is going to be the biggest blowout of the weekend. Because what Lamar needs to do in this matchup is they need to run the ball. They had their medicine last year against the Chiefs, Rob, when they were not able to run the ball and Lamar was all on him in a huge environment and it was I need to make the plays. It did not work out well. He got out of the pocket way too much. He looked flustered, wasn't able to do much, and the walls caved in on him. What he needs to do is manage the game. No Zay Flowers. You need to run the ball yourself. You need to get Derrick Henry involved a lot, get all of your receivers involved, and honestly play a game manager type of game. Josh Allen cannot afford that type of game against this Ravens defense at home, where, this Bills offense, highest points per game of any team in the NFL, and there's not really that stud next to him. That's why it's been so impressive what he's been able to do all season long. There's so much on his shoulders, play by play, running the ball, throwing the ball, making decisions, changing plays. And I'm not saying that's not on Lamar. We're really splicing the difference here. But the Ravens' best chance to win, I think you would agree with this. Their best chance is if Derrick Henry has a monster game. That is the surefire way for them to win this game. If Derrick Henry doesn't have a great game, it's going to spell a lot more trouble for this Ravens offense going forward. Whereas if Josh Allen doesn't have a good game, they're cooked. They're done. But Lamar could have a fine game and let Derrick Henry in the run game take over, just like they did in week 5 when they played and Derrick Henry took that game over and they blew the Bills out. So that's why I'm hesitating just at that question, Larab.
Well, I feel like we're gonna have a similar score prediction, or I am, of what did happen in that Week 4 game. This
Mm,
Ravens defense is what I really want to spotlight. They have been playing like the best defense in football, I believe, since maybe Week 12. Number
last
one,
7 weeks, they are
yeah,
number one in DVOA, number one in efficiency, third down. They have been lights out.
and it's been really stark how they flipped that switch from earlier in the season, right? And it's been really different from how they've been playing the last couple years. We talk about this Ravens defense off to a hot start. They're winning a lot of games early. They're dominating on both sides of the ball, but it wasn't like that for them this year. They were letting up huge chunk plays every single game, and they're a reason for why they lost so many games. But the wave they've turned around, playing football, their best football at the right time. And I think Josh Allen in this game is going to struggle. just like he struggled in that game that they had in week 4. They're not going to be able to run the ball at all. They don't have that dominant guy on the outside to really pick up that slack. I just think this Bills team is in for a shock at home.
I agree with you. I didn't want to. I went into the week saying, what is the case I can make for Buffalo? What is the way I can get cute and get another leg up on Laraib? Because I knew you were picking the Ravens ever since you drafted Zay Flowers in fantasy, right? Like you were in love with this team. And I get it. I get it. They're super talented and the defense has shored up. I mean, I just brought it up. You just talked about it. I mean, past 7 weeks, they've been playing at the best defensive football. And what changed? What changed was moving Kyle Hamilton into the box, letting him play more of a free roamer, guarding your best tight end, just causing havoc in the middle of the field, and letting guys in the back end really play those back deep positions. And their secondary has shored up a lot more. Marlon Humphrey has been playing like an all-pro corner this season, being healthy, being on the field. He's been outstanding for them. And then this defensive line. Matabike, their best defensive lineman from last year, hasn't been getting a ton of sacks and pressures, but he's been getting a lot of double teams, which has opened up a ton for Owe, for Kyle Van Noy, just really allowing these edge rushers to have these elite 101 matchups. And I will say that is one of the most interesting matchups I'm looking forward to in this game because Josh Allen, the least sack quarterback in NFL history this season, looking at sack rate, pressure rate, this offensive line has been outstanding. Top 3 offensive line in football and definitely by far the best of Josh Allen's career. So keeping him upright has allowed him. You brought up only 4 interceptions for Lamar, only 6 interceptions on the year for Josh Allen. He's been uber efficient as well running the ball. But how much can he shoulder in this game versus how efficient the Ravens can be against, let's face it, a worse Buffalo defense? I mean, this Buffalo defense, and in spots, has been good, but we saw them against an elite offense in Detroit a few weeks ago give up almost 40 points, albeit they were playing soft zones, they're up big, but still, I mean, you still got to play defense in a game like that. And there's big exploitable matchups. I think the Ravens, if they're able to run the ball, this game is cooked. I think you will see a score like, way earlier in the season. I don't think they're going to run the ball with as much success, but I still think they're going to be able to run the ball and get points on the board because of it. And ultimately, then it's going to come down to, can Lamar do enough? Can he do enough to win this game? And I think Derrick Henry gives him the springboard in this matchup to allow him to just make the right plays, find the right guys. Not having Zay Flowers really does hurt. And he's not officially out, but he didn't practice today on Thursday. And that's kind of a bad sign for Ravens, for players, most likely, whenever they don't practice on a Thursday. So I'm going to assume he's out in this game. So not having that vertical threat to really open up things for the run game does hurt. But I think there's more ways, just in conclusion, there's more ways the Ravens can win this game than the Bills can. So even though it's on the road, I'm leaning Ravens here.
Yeah, and it looks like we agree on all of our games this week, Lewis. And for this Bills team, a lot of people bring up the pieces that they didn't have in that first matchup, right? Our guy, Matt Milano, will be playing. Bernard will be back in at linebacker position as well, playing. But it just doesn't make that much sense to me of how much they can improve against this Ravens team, the way they're playing football in dominating fashion. Now, I will say the Steelers put up 14 points last week. And both of those touchdowns were on those long, deep balls down the field to George Pickens. If Amari Cooper can wake up in this game, if Matt
Keon
Collins can
Coleman.
wake up in this game and have those explosive shots down the field, because that's one thing, that's one way you can exploit this Ravens secondary, is through that vertical aspect. And so if Josh Allen can hit on those deep bombs like he did against the Broncos, they have a good shot in this game. But I just don't think that they can do it against this Ravens team who's going to be controlling the clock, stopping the run. That's a recipe for success in the playoffs. I think Lamar moves on to the AFC Championship for the second year in a row. I like the Ravens to win this game 26-17.
A big key for me is Sean McDermott. This is the playoffs. Josh Allen is your quarterback. The MVP, co front runner, whatever, he is a stud. If it's 4th and 2, I don't care where you are. I don't care if there's no points on the board by either team. This is not a game you can afford to be conservative in. You need to let your star quarterback be a star. That was the problem, and most of their playoff losses, Josh Allen has lost his last 5 playoff games in this round alone. And a lot of it has been conservative play calling from Sean McDermott and this bend don't break defense getting spanked around. He needs to let Josh Allen cook, and they win this game by outscoring the Bills. I mean, the Ravens, obviously, but in a higher scoring game. That's what I mean. I think they will score points. I think this will be a very entertaining game, but it's going to be too much, too little, and way too much Derrick Henry in this matchup for the Ravens. I mean, for the Bills to really match as good as Josh Allen is, as much as I think he's just an excellent quarterback. I think Lamar is a little bit less than that, but Derrick Henry is a lot of that. So it definitely makes up for the gap. I'm going with the Ravens this one with a score of 41 to Bills 36. It's going to be an all-timer high-scoring affair. Ultimately, the Ravens get it done. Move on to the AFC Championship for a rematch.
All right, well, that is gonna wrap it up for all of our divisional picks.
I have a best bet.
I also have a best bet to throw up, but with both of us picking the same teams this week, meaning I won't have to be stressing on my couch for any of these
I
games.
know we can
But
enjoy football.
that means one, you will be up 1 point for sure going into the AFC
Ooh.
Championship. That is going to be really interesting to see which way we both lean in that for
You know
next
where I'm
week.
going if it's the AFC Championship.
And I know which way I'm going. But before
Ooh.
we go, we have two best bets for you guys. The first and goal, FanDuel best bets from last week, both cashed. Let's keep that hot streak going. I'm going to go ahead and start us off with my best bet, Washington, Detroit to go under 55.5 points. I think this is finally the spot where Jayden Daniels, kind of the bright lights get to him, and Dan Campbell puts his seal of approval on this game as they win in dominating fashion.
My best bet, Xavier Worthy, anytime touchdown. We saw he had a monster game against the Texans last time. Now, Andy Reid's had almost 3 weeks to prepare and scheme up Xavier Worthy. We saw last season Rashee Rice break out during the playoffs. I think Xavier Worthy, with this time off, getting more chemistry with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid locking into a playbook for playoff time. I think there's going to be some trickery, some tomfoolery, and some worthy touchdowns on the board. Give me Xavier Worthy anytime touchdown.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for our divisional round predictions. We will be back on Tuesday to give you our recap of what happened this week, hopefully. But for sure, we'll see you next Thursday for our championship round predictions. But I think this is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.